if we go back to the EU and dissatisfaction with the politics of the EU and those who are running it, technocrats is the buzzword, how do you define where that's gone wrong? You use the term liberal democracy. Can you define that a little bit, and also, just extrapolate of how that is the opposite? That's become the anti-movement, really, isn't it? This technocracy. Is that right?
Yeah, technocracy. The European Union was initially set up as a series of institutions that were not very wide-ranging. They were focused on very specific things, on coal and steel, the industries. But they were not set up as a body to represent the wishes of majorities.
Yeah.
We have to remember, in the context of the Second World War, there was a strong suspicion that majorities would put people like Hitler, fascists, into power. And so there was a desire to constrain the power of national governments and national majorities by creating institutions that were in some way independent from popular will.
Yeah.
Now, if we think of the term liberal democracy, liberalism as an idea is very much about individual rights being protected against the power of governments, and particularly the power of tyrannical majorities.
Yeah.
This is the tradition of liberalism. Now, democracy is just a slightly simpler idea. It's just power to the people, but it's become associated with majoritarianism. If you have a majority, you can do within certain limits what you want. Now, in the post-Cold War, the post-1989 period, for the last 20 years or so, I think we've gotten used to thinking about liberal democracy as just a simple term that has no tensions within it.
Yeah.
In actual fact, I think liberalism and democracy have a very uneasy relationship. And so what we're seeing today is, if you like, the return of democratic sentiment challenging some key liberal principles.
So there's a split.
There is certainly a tension which is now evident.
Okay. And you've already said at the beginning that you think this is an existential crisis for the EU. And from what you've just said, are democratic values in terms of majorityism and this liberal idea that protects the individual, are they reconcilable? And this is probably a challenge for the political establishment, I would imagine.
I think it is a challenge. They are reconcilable, absolutely. Nothing stops people with liberal values from running in elections and winning elections and forming majorities.
Yeah.
And for a long time that has happened consistently. What I think we're beginning to see now is that that's no longer happening in such a consistent way. So we have people who are clearly challengers or opponents of certain established liberal values are actually getting quite far in elections.
Yeah.
In some instances, winning them.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is what's changed. Now, the response of liberals, I've always been very critical of liberals who've tried to respond by taking power away from the people, by isolating it in institutions that are not accountable to popular will. I think liberals should actually just try and argue back and make their case and see if they can win the argument.
Okay, so you're saying that when they do that, when they try and become more of the same, it's exacerbating the problem.
I think it does, there's no doubt.
The UK government look like they're prepared to sacrifice access to the single market in favour of border controls, immigration controls, these kinds of more populist and demands of our majority rule over the economic. Why do you think that is? I mean, does this tie back into what we were just talking about?
So I think the results of the referendum were reasonably clear.
Yeah.
The two issues which people were most concerned about were issues of control, sovereignty, and issues of immigration. Now, it's very clear that establishing some controls on immigration runs against the economic interests of a lot of sectors in the country, particularly the financial sector, but others as well. Now, the government has finds itself where it has to make some sort of choice. I think it would be hard pressed to say that it was respecting the decision of the referendum by maintaining as much access to the single market as possible and establishing no new controls over borders. But there's clearly a struggle here going on within the political system, and those interests who are used to influencing government, the City of London in particular, wants what it calls a soft Brexit. It wants to maintain as much access to the single market as possible. Now, on the other hand, you have people who voted in the referendum who aren't used to being listened to in many cases, who nevertheless made their position quite clear. Whether or not you agree with it, whether or not you think it's in their interests, is neither here nor there. That was simply the issue that was argued for in the referendum. People voted for it. And so you start to have this struggle now between economic interests and, if you like, the political result of the referendum. And I think the government is might be inclined to try and support its traditional constituency, which includes the City of London, but it can't really ignore the result of the referendum, and they have to make a choice, which includes reimposing some controls on free movement.
Okay.